cryptocurrencies and just kind of how to understand their supply. And then this week, what we're going to be talking about is just like when new cryptocurrencies come out, like how do they launch? Like they launch in so many ways. So we're going to look into a couple ones that we like over here, and just like, talk about what type of launch they go through, and then what types of incentives that creates, and how that kind of like sets the course for the lifetime of the coin. And so we're going to go pretty deep into the Hex launch, which we're a little bit more than halfway done with, and yeah, so what we're gonna try to do today is we're gonna try to calculate what the inflation rate of Hex is going to be throughout the different phases of its launch period. So we're going to look into some of the data as well and try to paint a picture for what the future of Hex looks like. But before that, we always
I was hoping, are you willing to talk about the Nexo? I'm super curious about this.
Yeah. So so Colleen, why don't you kind of like
ask? Well, yeah, you posted in the Telegram today. I'll just read it. Sometimes innovation is about thinking big, not smart, not big. The minimum amount for Nexo's instant crypto credit line is now only $10, making it the lowest credit minimum in the crypto space, considerably improving the inclusivity and accessibility of financial services. Like, please say, because that just sounds like, yeah, where the revolution begins.
Yeah. So what she's talking about is a platform called Nexo that we've talked. I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. We actually gave a tutorial, so you should go back and look at that video. But Nexo is a lending platform. That's one of the main applications of cryptocurrencies, is that they're really useful to hold as collateral that you can then extend a line of credit against. So it's kind of like getting a home equity line of credit where you might borrow against your house. In a similar way, if you have Bitcoin or you have Ethereum, you can borrow against it. And so Nexo is a platform that enables you to extend a line of credit from your crypto. And so Nexo, it's useful in like, it's useful in for a couple ways. The main use case is for trading. So if you have Bitcoin and you want to invest in another coin, rather than selling, like if you think the price of Bitcoin is going to go up, you don't really want to sell your Bitcoin and then invest in the other thing, because then you're relying. So if you have a thing to go up faster than Bitcoin would have, and so another way to approach it would be, if you want to keep your Bitcoin, is you would hold the Bitcoin as collateral and then take out a loan against the Bitcoin, and then with the loan you then buy the other coin. And so now you have the Bitcoin as collateral, and then you have the other coin that you bought, and you owe the amount of the loan, but you can pay that off over a number of years. So just like with other income or other investments, you can be paying off that loan. And because the loan is secured by your Bitcoin, you can usually get a really good interest rate that's typically a lot better than you would get with a credit card. And you benefit from the value of your collateral going up, because during the course of like, say you have $1,000 of Bitcoin, and you lock it up, and then you take out a $500 loan, and then you buy something else. If during the time, like between when you borrow the money and when you pay it back, if the value of your collateral goes up, like say your $1,000 of Bitcoin is now worth $2,000, you still only owe $500. And so you can use some of your collateral to pay off the loan. And so, so like if the value of your collateral goes up enough, it could end up paying back your entire loan for you. And so that's why like it's like, that's why like crypto is such like a useful form of collateral, because from like the lender's perspective, like so when you want to borrow against it, you send it to the lender, and they just hold it there, and then they send you back dollars. Usually you take out loans in stable coins, so coins that are backed 1-to-1 with the dollar. And the lender likes it because it's free to store. Like storing Bitcoin is like costs almost nothing, and it's very liquid. So like it can be sold at a moment's notice. Like if you fail to pay your loan, they can sell your collateral and then recoup their cost. Or and so it's a combination of being really cheap to store and really liquid, that makes it a really good thing to accept as collateral if you're a lender. And then from the borrower's perspective, it's a really good form of collateral because the price can go up a lot. And if during the time when you borrowed against your Bitcoin, the price goes up, it can decrease the amount that you have to like pay back for the loan. And so from both the lender and the borrower's perspective, it's just like it enables just like a really healthy lending ecosystem, which turns into like lower interest rates, longer requirements, smaller, amounts of collateral required. So that I think is like going to be the first major financial use case of crypto that like, is used in like the public. Because not everyone's going to be using some of these more like advanced like investment contracts, but everybody has a credit card. And so like what Nexo announced today is that they decreased their minimum credit line from $500 to now $10. And so it used to be where you used to have $1,000 of crypto to take out a $500 loan. Now it's, probably that collateral requirement will remain the same, but now you need $20 of crypto to take out a $10 loan. So it went from being where the loans were mainly only useful in like making investments, where like people are using that to like trade with. Now with like the smaller credit, smaller minimum credit line, I can see this going into more of like a consumer credit application where, you as a Bitcoin holder, rather than using a credit card, which might charge like a 24% interest rate, you can just use Bitcoin that you want to hold anyways. You can use that to get you a line of credit where the interest rate is usually between 10 and 16%. So I think this might start bridging kind of the gap to where Bitcoin itself like probably won't be used as currency, but Bitcoin-backed loans could be used in like a consumer setting, where rather than having a credit card that requires a credit check, requires, it like remembers bad financial decisions you made in the past, like all these things, like you don't need that. When you're on Nexo, like there's no credit check, no background check. It's like you post the collateral and you can get the line of credit. And so I think that's gonna be a really powerful way that like people can like have Bitcoin and actually like put it to work for them. So that's what's really exciting about the decreasing minimum credit line on Nexo is that it opens up the door for more of like consumer credit based on Bitcoin holdings. So that's really, really exciting.
Yeah. And I can see how also just the idea of smaller amounts of money, right? Mattering that I don't know how to even say it, but yeah, smaller amounts of money let the regular person get in and make this all feel so much more comfortable. I don't know. It just feels really important to me.
Yeah. It definitely, just overall, because this stuff runs based on, and you want to invest in software and math, like overall, like the cost of participation decreases. Cause like with like traditional financial services, like there's like a minimum because like, JP Morgan needs to like, employ a bunch of people and they need to, pay for like all these buildings they have and they have all this overhead. And so like there's like a minimum like, barrier to entry. But in these cryptocurrencies and these blockchains, because they're more like public goods, the minimum is whatever is like minimally feasible. And there's no like overhead because it's not companies that run these. It's just like the incentives of the network. And so that like enables these, systems to work at like smaller and smaller scales. And so like, and I mean, this like, there are places where you can get similar like small scale loans like through like there's certain smart contracts that are kind of like Nexo. Like Nexo still is a trusted counterparty, so you like you still have to bear the risk of like Nexo losing your money or Nexo like somehow getting like sued and like your money now belongs to someone else. Like there's that risk in there, but there's some of these smart contract lending solutions that have emerged that enable those smaller ones, but those require like a more advanced like knowledge. Where Nexo is like, it's really consumer friendly because you're not like operating like on like you don't have to like first like learn about like how to use like MetaMask and how to use the Ethereum like apps and stuff. Like it's just like working on like a normal banking app. So for some people, like, it's a little bit easier to approach. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is gonna, like, it just like increases the number of people that can, improve their like financial standing, like through this stuff. Because being able to leverage your crypto as collateral, that's like a really powerful thing. And so it's really important that that's more accessible.
It's amazing. Thank you, Brian. Before we go into Hex, though, do you mind addressing Flow? What happened to Flow and where it is this week? Flow Shiloh.
Oh yeah, that was a tough one. So let's see. So last week we talked about Flow. It was one that it was just like a couple days old. And we were talking about it is because Flow has certain supply characteristics that are similar to Bitcoin and also similar to Hex. And so we were just talking about it. And like in that time, like it was one of these ones that like, just we'd like seen on the first day that right when it launched, we heard about it. And then we bought into it, and then it just pumped. It was like 1,000% gain in literally like a couple days. But since then and so like we were talking about it last week to talk about, just like, how to understand new coins, like I think we're talking about the risks involved in like getting in on day one. Like sometimes getting in on day one can pay off. Other times getting in on day one can leave you wrecked. And so we were talking about the different risks of like brand new coins. And it was an exciting one because it had gone up so fast. And so literally, what was the data last week's? Literally, last week it was like at the very, very peak right here. Like we were talking about it right here. And then it's we're the top. Like and so it's pretty much sold off.
Yeah, it was the 20th. That's right.
Yeah. So like, since we talked about it, price sold off. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like that because the way we approach this, and this is like kind of like some I've learned the hard way on other things. Like if you invest in something new and it goes up a ton, you should take out your minimum amount and then, like leave the rest as like house money and like be selling off from there, because like, you don't want to like, you don't want something that goes like 10x to turn into like a 1x or like even a loss. Like you should definitely lock in profits, because then you have more money to like buy back in lower if you want to. And so, we definitely, exited. I still have some that I wish I would have sold, but I'm still like, I still go by what I said last time, is that like, I'm trying to wait out the first 60 days of Flow's launch. I'm trying to wait out for that to kind of see what happens. But since we talked about it, it went down by as much as 80%, but today it actually had a 80% gain. Like today.
Truly, I hadn't seen that gain when I asked you that question. So the moment you just pulled, I had looked earlier in the day and I was like, yo, it doesn't look so good today.
Yeah. But yeah. And I wish I would have, bought this dip, but, I didn't want to, one, I wasn't really paying attention, but two, I was just kind of like, I already have the amount that I said that I was going to just like stick with, and, there's always more opportunities. But yeah, I mean, so like it's sold off 80%, but today it already regained 80%. And so that's like, it kind of points an interesting thing where like selling the top is like selling the top to try to buy the bottom is pretty hard, because price had to move all this way for you to get like an 80% gain. But buying buying a dip, just helps you, gain so much more, because 80% down is this whole way, but 80% up is just this much. When you just look at that. And so like, selling is always like a tough thing to like strategize around, because you never know. But buying dips is always just like a good strategy, because like when the price goes down, then the denominator is lower, and so the percent, like for every dollar that it goes back up, like that percent is like larger than it would have been had you started higher up. So like, yeah, I mean, like Flow, big sell off, really it's just like people taking profit, like, people who bought on these days just like taking profit, and then the people who'd bought up here selling to cut their loss. So like once all the people that that like once all the people that like buy down here, bought up here are selling to cut their loss. So like once all the people that, the green line, one sec. So like once all the people that bought down here and then sold up here and, you know, up here and like, you know, people, you know, sell, like people who bought here then selling there, like once they run out of flow to sell, and then once the people who bought up here and then are selling to cut their losses, once like all the people who either bought here or bought here have sold all their flow, either locking in their profits or cutting their losses, then the price can turn around when like new buyers come in. And so that's pretty, you know, what we saw today. Let's look at the hourly chart on flow. So let me try to zoom out. Yeah. So, you know, we can look at these like waves of like, you know, all these sellers, you know, so there was the, you know, the big push up. There was that double top. Remember on our first video, we talked about like these double top formations where like, it's like a signal that like sellers or buyers don't have enough energy and enough money to like keep pushing the price up. And so the sellers start taking profit. That's kind of what we saw here.
Bat formations?
Yeah, the double top.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, you know, so price was selling down, and then, you know, starting, looks like yesterday, price went sideways. Remember when we talked, I think a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at the Hex chart. We were talking about like price usually starts moving back up once it's moved sideways for long enough, because that means that like there aren't enough sellers to keep pushing the price down. And then the buyers are starting to like feel more confident because price, you know, it's not in like as strong of a downtrend anymore. So that's kind of what happened here, is that like price was like pretty flat during this period of time. And then, you know, so that, you know, gave buyers confidence that like the bottom was in, and then they started, you know, buying back in. So if we wanted to, we could look at the trades. I don't really want to go into that today, but like, you know, maybe later I might look at to see who are the people that are buying this. Like who are the people who are like actually in their, you know, who like are the people that bought today to push the price up? Are they the ones that sold the top? Like, did they just sell the top and then buy the bottom? Like, you know, those are things you can look at the blockchain and answer. So that, you know, that's probably what it is. You know, it's just like normal trading. It's really amplified because it's such a new thing where it doesn't take much money to push the price up and it doesn't take much money to push the price down. So it can create a lot more volatility. But still, it's, you know, pretty exciting to watch unfold. And it actually kind of looks like, I don't think we'd started our calls by this time, but during the first like week of Hex's existence, price went up like 5x and then fully went back down lower than where it was when it started. And so that happens early in these coins' lifetimes. You know, like Bitcoin went from like $0 to $32 back to like 10 cents at one point in time. And so like, that's like a pretty common thing across coins of, you know, just like new in their life cycle when there's a ton of risk, a lot of unknowns, and a lot of uncertainty. You know, price can wildly fluctuate. Like, you know, it would be pretty shocking if there was price movement like this in Bitcoin today, because it's like already so like a lot of the risk has already been removed, and there's so much liquidity that it's like just less volatile than these. You know, but these make for good trade opportunities for people that, you know, this is actually something that benefits people who don't have a lot of money more than it benefits people that have a lot of money. Because if you have like millions of dollars and you're trying to trade this, like your $1 million buy order is going to push the price up like half the way, and your $1 million sell order is going to push the price down further. So like people with like huge amounts of money, it's actually harder for them to trade these like smaller markets because they just like make up such a big proportion of the market. So it introduces slippage. That's like when your buy order pushes the price up or your sell order pushes the price down. And so big players actually have a hard time trading these, but people in just like, you know, the couple of $1,000 range, like they don't have enough money to like drastically impact the price themselves. And so it's easier for them to like get in and get out without, you know, like cutting into their profits too much. So in this setting, it's actually like a benefit to not be like too big of a whale, because You can trade these smaller markets that have like larger price swings, and like your trading isn't going to take out a lot of the profit. So that's kind of what's interesting to me about new things like flow. So we'll see where this goes. Like we're still it's I'll probably I didn't buy this dip. I don't know if I will. I'm probably gonna wait for like another like similar scale dip. Even if it's like a lot higher, like even if like the flow chart, even if it does something like goes up a lot higher than it was here. I'll probably wait for the next major dip, because if price goes up a lot here in flow, so if like, price goes to there and then it, sells off, let's look at maybe another like 80%. So we want this to sell off 80%. So like, I'll probably like, I'll wait for the next big 80% sell off if it's higher than this, because what that means is that like the difference between this bottom right here and whatever the other bottom is, it's like a measure of how much risk is alleviated. So like still, I think flow is like just very risky. And so I'm going to wait until the next like kind of full like bull and bust cycle and see where that kind of plays out. And then that's probably the dip that I'm going to look to buy in at. Because at this point, like, this could like get the rug pulled and go to zero, like at this point, really. But if it goes through another like bull and bust cycle, the odds of that happening are a little bit less. So that's probably when I'll be looking in, but we'll definitely keep watching this chart.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been sort of our ongoing soap opera chart the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. This is an exciting topic. And I guess, speaking of like, new coins, that's pretty good segue into what the main topic of tonight is going to be. It's what we're going to be looking at is just kind of looking at how the Hex launch has played out so far. And what that means, like, looking forward. And so, we'll definitely, we've talked about it before here, just kind of like this launch process that Hex is going through. But we'll go back over that, and then we'll also talk a little bit about how it compares to other coins that, because like when people are launching new cryptocurrencies, there's a lot of strategy in how you roll it out. Because it has to balance all these different things, like, how are you going to get new investors? How are you going to finance it before it's ready to like launch to like the public? How are you going to pay for like that development and testing, and how secure are these things when they launch? So like with new coins, there's a lot of strategy in how they roll out, and I think that's like one of the most important aspects of a coin, because that just sets the stage for where it goes from there. And so Hex, I think, is a good example of like a new coin that's in the middle of its launch phase, and in some ways I think there are characteristics that are setting it up for success. And then there are other things that I think could have been better about the launch. And so we'll go over those and talk about that. Pretty much, so Hex launched 270 days ago. So it launched on December 3rd, 2019. And the way it's launching is there are two parts to the launch. One of it is it's called the Bitcoin free claim. So on December 2nd, there was a snapshot of the Bitcoin blockchain where every person who held Bitcoin on that day was eligible to claim 10,000 hex per Bitcoin that they held for free. So it was called like the Bitcoin free claim. So that's a pretty common strategy for coins to launch through, sometimes it's called an airdrop, where everybody who has one coin can get like the new one for free. So it's either called an airdrop, or sometimes it's called a fork. So examples of that are one that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. That one was different because Bitcoin Cash was trying new features that weren't going to be able to roll into Bitcoin. So they created a new version, and they took a snapshot of all the Bitcoin holders on that day, and then they credited all those people an equal amount of Bitcoin Cash. So that's one way to do it, is where you just take everybody in the coin and then you enable them, like you just give it to them for free. Another type of airdrop is where, like, numerous, like, people that hold Ethereum on a certain day, they might get an airdrop. And so it doesn't really matter what coin, like people set up airdrops for all these different ones. Sometimes there's like coins that launch they're going to airdrop, say, like everyone who has Zcash gets this new airdrop of like whatever coin. And then in preparation for that airdrop, a lot of people will buy into, say, Zcash, and that'll push the price of Zcash up a lot in preparation for this airdrop. So like, airdrops are pretty common. They happen all the time. And they're a little less frequent than they used to be. They used to happen a lot, but just it was really hard to launch new coins in like 2018 and 2019 because the market just wasn't as vibrant, because it was in the middle of the bear market. So like it was harder to launch new things. So like right now we're seeing like a new wave of like new coins that are launching, and they're launching because there's a lot of investor interest. There's a lot of demand for like new things that you can get in on one day and like 10x your money in a week. Like there's like a lot of people are looking for that. And so now is like a great time to launch new coins. And so like, Hex did this airdrop. It started in December 3rd. And then that's what lays out what the total supply of Hex is going to be. So like there's not like a set amount of Hex. The number of Hex, well, I guess there is, but it's kind of worked into backwards. Like every day that goes by, all the coins that are not claimed for free, they start to deteriorate. So if you claimed with your Bitcoin on the first day, you got 10,000 Hex. If you were to claim, I think today, let's see where we can find what that is. You don't get all the Hex. So every day that goes by that you don't free claim, you lose like an amount of Hex that you would have got. And that Hex goes into a pool that gets paid out to all of the stakers. So what it turns into is that at the end of this 350-day launch period, all the Hex that was not claimed by the Bitcoin holders that were eligible to claim it, all that Hex gets distributed to all of the people that have Hex time locks. So everybody who's entered a stake with Hex gets a portion of this pool of unclaimed coins. And the amount you get is based on how long and how much you have staked. And so every day that goes by, let's take a look at, let's look at a chart to look at the amount of Bitcoin that has been claimed up till now. And then we'll see, what, like just kind of, roughly how many people have claimed, and then how much of this Hex is ultimately going to get paid out to all the stakers. So if we go in here and we let's look at visualizations, or maybe there's a stakes claims. Here we go. Okay, so this is the chart that we're on. Here, I'm going to minimize that. Let's change this to not last 30 days. Let's go to the beginning. So December 3rd. Update. Let's go December 2nd so we can make sure we got all the first day. So did Hema just join us? Or did someone just join us? Hey. So this is the claim chart. So far, 29,000 different Bitcoin holders have claimed their free Hex in a total of 2.7 billion. So let's see if we can find how many have been, maybe on hexinfo.io. Let's see if we can find a chart that shows all the claims. Okay, here we go. This will tell us. Okay, so we're 270 days through the 350-day launch phase. So far, only 2.7% of all the available Hex, or all the available Bitcoin to claim with, has been claimed. So what that means is that, like, so every Bitcoin, like, of the available Bitcoin. So I think it says right here the total number that's eligible to claim. Let's see. Where is? I thought it's okay, but maybe it's not available there. Where can I find the number of? Okay, so right here. Here's what it says. So far, 246,000 Bitcoin has been, like, the Hex allotted to that has been claimed. And then 8.9 million Bitcoin that is eligible to claim free Hex with has not. So this is like a pretty important figure for Hex. And this is something that's confusing, but it adds uncertainty, and uncertainty gives energy for the price to go up. And so with the, like, so all these people that claim, so what this means is that people that have $246,000 worth of Bitcoin, so 246,123 times what's the price today, like 11,300. So people with over $2.5 billion in total claimed Hex for free. So people that have $2 billion got Hex for free and saw the value of their Hex go from, 0 to 0.03 cents. Right now, got as high as 0.06 cents. So people that got this for free, so people that have $2 billion ready to invest, saw Hex go on this, like, crazy price run, where, like, they saw it go from, 0 to even at the bottom of this, like, big sell-off. Like, they saw a massive price run. So that, like, to me, that's really bullish for Hex, is that people that already have Hex have this much more Bitcoin, like, ready to invest. Like, so that's a lot, even though it's only 2.7% of the Bitcoin that's available to claim. A lot of that has to do with, one, just like people not knowing about it, like people that have Bitcoin, but didn't know about it, like, they're not going to claim. People that just, like, lost their coins, they can't claim. And not all Bitcoin are eligible to claim. It's only Bitcoin held in certain wallet formats that can claim. So in total, it was about 9 million Bitcoin was eligible to claim. But a really small amount has been claimed. And so, so a way to think about it is that there's about 10,000 Hex available per Bitcoin. So if we have 10,000 and times 9 million, 123, that means that, like, that there's, like, the minimum supply of Hex is at least, like, this 90 billion. But that's not all the Hex. We're going to talk about the other source of new Hex in a second. But the, like one of the components of Hex's total supply is from this unclaimed, or from this, like, Bitcoin claim process. And so if we have, what does it say here? How much Hex has been claimed? So claimed Bitcoin. So so 10,000 times 246.246862. So that's about 2 billion Hex. So that means about 80 billion Hex is going to be distributed amongst all the stakers. So, like, all the Hex that would go to all these people who didn't claim, that's going to go to all the stakers, and it's going to be distributed based on how much they've staked. So all of this Hex is going to go to these 14. Right now it's about 15% of people. 15% of Hex is staked. I think closer to when this date is, this number is going to grow because more people are going to want a share of this big payday, is what it's called. So like this will probably change, but like if this was today, there like all of this hex would go to 15% of the hex of the total hex holders. And so from their perspective, they just got like a massive ROI. But from the perspective of everybody who holds hex that is not staked, they actually had a loss because their proportion of the total hex decreased by a lot. Whereas the people that got a share of this like new hex, their amount relative to the total supply increased. So this is one of the big incentives for people to buy during the first year and stake for as long as they can, is because if you don't have a stake open, you're not eligible for all the hex that gets delivered at the end of this launch phase. So this is like on one hand, I think this whole Bitcoin claim part was like really confusing for new people. And it's like just like another thing that you have to like understand in order for you to like want to like feel confident enough to buy it. So like on one hand, I think that like the whole free claim thing was probably unnecessary. They could have done it fully without the free claim. Or they could have done the free claim like separate from like defining what the total supply is, because like, you know, the amount of people that claim impacts what the total supply is. And so I think they could have made it just separate, where it's like just like a free airdrop and more of like a marketing thing, as opposed to something that like sets the coin on its course for the rest of time. But on the other hand, the uncertainty that introduces, that actually gives a lot of energy for price to go up, because the more unknowns there are, the more risk there is, and the more risk there is, the more potential reward there is. So it's kind of like a dual-edged sword, where on one hand, it's kind of confusing for like new people to wrap their head around. So it's like less people could be joining that otherwise would have. But on the other hand, having that uncertainty really makes for like, it like just pumps up, it just like pumps up the energy, like the potential energy for like crazy price movement in the future. Like right now, it's uncertain what the total supply of hex is going to be. But on the day 350, when this launch period ends, it's going to be very clear what the total supply is and who has it. And that could cause crazy shifts in the price, where like the market needs to react to like, you know, a new understanding of what the reality is. So this is going to be a pretty exciting thing to watch unfold. Like, you know, how many like eligible claimants are going to actually claim. So like what you can see here is that like the majority of the claiming happened on the first day. So this is people that were like already like tuned in, like ready to claim, because like you had to claim like so for instance, like when I did my free claim, so like I store my crypto in a wallet format that is more secure. But this like more secure type of wallet format, it's so secure that it wasn't like, it's like the way they did the snapshot, it couldn't measure those ones. So it only measured coins that were in this like older format of wallet. And so like I had to like to do my free claim, I had to move my crypto from one wallet, from my wallet format to this older wallet format, just in time for the snapshot. Then I moved my money back into my main wallet, like, you know, my more secure wallet format, multi-sig. And you know, just after the snapshot was done. And then I went through the process of claiming with my hex, where you type in your Bitcoin address, you know, so like I wouldn't know how to pull up an address to show here, but you know, before I claimed, I like had to move my coins into the claimable wallet, and then I moved them back into my more secure wallet. And then that. So a lot of so what this chart shows, that like there are probably a lot of people that were like prepared for it. So 115,000 Bitcoin was claimed on this first day. So that's like over $1 billion of Bitcoin. So people that have control of over $1 billion of Bitcoin are now hex holders. So people that can now buy hex. or might have an incentive to buy more hex because they see how it works. And so a lot of it was like, that was when most of the claiming happened, was during this like first day. But then a whole other batch of claimants happened during this first crazy price run. So let's try to zoom. So I just zoomed in here. So when we look at the, so like when Hex really started taking off in April, because it like at the start, like when hexes were nothing and one Bitcoin meant 10,000 hex. And at the time, Bitcoin was about, I think it was about $8,000. So at the time, $8,000 was getting you 10,000 hex. So right now, 10,000 hex is worth about $30. So like the claim was actually like really, really tiny at like the very beginning. Like it was like a really small amount. Like, so for most people, like it wasn't worth the effort of like going through the claim process, or they just didn't know about Hex because it was like brand new thing. No one knew about it, whatever. But when price really went up, like how you can see on this chart where I zoomed in to like April, a lot of people were claiming it because one, like a lot of people like first learned about Hex when it had that first crazy price run. But two, like the price, like the Hex that they were getting for free, maybe it like reached a certain threshold where like, getting like just like a couple bucks of free Hex for like, in order to like go through the process of like, signing a signature from your Bitcoin wallet to claim your Hex, like it might not have been feasible or might not have been worth it. But when Hex was as high as like, 0.6 cents, like it might be worth it. And so when price had that really big run up, there were like a lot of claims. But then when price kind of died back down, here, let me refresh this chart. When price kind of died back down to where it's at about now, there just wasn't the claiming slowed down. So what we might see, I think most of the claiming is already done. Like, I think by now everyone who would have heard about it and took action, I think they like by now they have. But with all of the but so I think most of it is already claimed. Like, we can let's take a look at how literally let's look at today how many were claimed. So probably a really small amount. So what's the date today? The 28th, the 27th. So on the 27th, only 0.28 Bitcoin was claimed with. So, and they got 719 hex. Because by this time, like they're not getting 10,000 hex per Bitcoin. They're getting like, it's like 1% off per day or something. So it like, by now they are like, they're probably, so 0.28 Bitcoin got 719 hex. So 0.28, so Bitcoin so hex per Bitcoin. So what was that number? 719 over 0.28. So 719 over 0.28. So right now they're only getting 2,500 hex per Bitcoin. On day one, you got 10,000 hex per Bitcoin. So like as it like tapers off, we'll probably see less and less free claims because like, somebody that has 0.28 Bitcoin, like let's look at Hex. Let's look at hex.live and see what the price is in Bitcoin. So like right now, like if you had 0.28 Bitcoin, you could buy so 0.28 divided by 0.12327. Is that right? Did I calculate that right? Yeah, that looks about right. So right now, like with 0.28 Bitcoin, you could buy over 1 million hex. So like 1 million hex right now is so 1 million times 0.03. That's about $3,000 So that is right. So like somebody with like today with that, with that 0.28 Bitcoin, like they're getting 719 hex for free. So 719 times 0.03. So they're getting $2 for free. Like they're probably getting, like the gas price on Ethereum to claim that is probably higher than that. So like, we may not even see many claims for the rest of the time because like every day that goes on, like Bitcoin holders just have less and less incentive to claim. So, maybe for like, so here, I'm going to kind of just pull up a spreadsheet. Is it going to let me do it? Okay, I'm just going to do it in numbers. So this isn't Excel, or this isn't Sheet, so I'm not quite familiar with it, but we're just going to try to we're going to try to estimate what the total is. So like, say like, this total number of like unclaimed versus claimed. So the unclaimed is 897. Let's see how I can go to numbers. So new document. So unclaimed BTC, let's just assume it's going to be 8,977,123. So just under 9 million Bitcoin. And so like every day that goes by, like a portion of it goes unclaimed, but per Bitcoin it's 10,000. So 10,000 Bitcoin are going to be claimed. And so in total, so like hex per Bitcoin. And so the total number, so the total hex that's going to be distributed to stakers is going to be 10,000 times that. So that is 123 million, 123. So 89.77 billion hex is going to be distributed amongst, all these stakers. So it like the amount of Bitcoin that's going to be, or the amount of hex that'll be distributed, like that's like, I'd say like this is probably going to be like 98% accurate. Like that number's not going to change by very much because like by now, like everyone that will have claimed already has, and the like amount you get by claiming is just like getting smaller and smaller every day. So like it just becomes less and less worth it. But like on the other hand, like, so the other part of the equation of like what you as a staker get from this distribution, it comes down to the stakers. So like if you go to hex.vision, I think somewhere in here there's a staker. Okay, here's a staker leaderboard. So let's take a look at this. So let's do, so just like, right here, like this just shows like the top 10 stakers. So like their average stake days. So everybody has a stake open on the day that, this comes to an end. So on day 351, if you have a stake open, you're going to get a portion of this, of this. So
Ryan, this is like crazy good news for those of us who are staked. Am I wrong that all that is unclaimed?
Yeah. So like when you go in here to like, put in so here, I think you can actually do it. So like, if you have like, let's say like you have 1 million hex. So, and you stake it for like, let's say 1,000 days. They actually estimate. So this is like if big payday, if the snapshot, if like the end of the launch was today, based on the number of stakers and based on the number of claims, like this amount of hex, like, so your 1 million hex that you stake at the end of this 1,000-day stake, you're going to unlock your $1 million, or not $1 million, maybe $1 million at that time. You're going to unlock your million hex plus the interest that the hex earned. So you're going to have 145, 145 trillion shares. So the shares is like your share of the staking pool. So you're going to get your stake plus your interest. And then on top of that, you're going to get this one-time payout of your big payday hex. And you get that big payday hex by having a time lock open on this date. So if you have a time lock open on day 351, you get a portion of that. So like, you're not only going to be getting like a big ROI from your interest, which right now I think like at the current, let's see, Hex.live shows it. Okay, it only shows it if you have, let's see if it, let's see if it shows the APY. Okay, so it doesn't show the APY, but right now it's about 25%, like 25% yearly interest on your time locks. So if you're this person, you stake today, if everything stays how it is today, which it won't, but like just for estimation, you're gonna get like, so that's about 3 years. Let's just, say it's 3 years, you're gonna get 25% per year. So you're at 1 million times 1.25, times 3. So it's not compounded, so I can't do that. So it's really times 3.75. So like no, it's 1.75, sorry. This is a rough estimation. This isn't exact because there's other things that go into like what the amount you get, but just like roughly, you're gonna get at the end of your time lock, you're gonna earn about 750,000 hex in interest, and then on top of that, you're gonna get that 2.7 million hex. So plus 2700123. So your 1 million hex that's locked for 3 years is going to turn into 4.45 million hex. So divided by, you at like, just by getting, like having a stake for that, you 4.45 times, like 4.45x your money measured in hex. You don't know what the price is going to do over that time. Like, price could go down, but by like over that time period, since your balance of hex has gone up by 4.45 times, price can actually go down and you could still be in profit. So you divide that by 1, that means that price could go down by, so 1 minus, price could go down by 77% from today, and you would still be in profit. So that's the power of these hex time locks, is that the inflation is getting paid to you. And so the more that your balance is going up, that gives price room to go down. So like when we look at the hex chart, like, like we're hoping that the price of this goes up a lot, so it's kind of had this first bull and bust cycle. And so like over the next couple of years, like the hex price could remain relatively stable. Like it may not even move that high up, but if the inflation of hex is getting paid to you, you're seeing an ROI. And it gives like the price flexibility to go down in price over this period of time. And so like it actually like, that's like, to me, the power of this time lock mechanism is that it gives you flexibility to make up for the price going down. Where like in like normal cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, it's like you want to buy, and then by the time you want to sell it, you want the price to go up, because the amount of Bitcoin you have remains the same. Whereas in Hex, like by earning the time lock, if during the time that your money's locked, with like if price goes down, the amount of new Hex that you earn during that time could make up for the amount that price went down. So like, that's like, the big payday is meant to reward the people who had like the vision and were able to take the risk to get into Hex and enter in a long-term stake during the first year. So like, not only like are you already taking a lot of risk from like entering a new coin and agreeing to be a part of that new coin for 15 years, like that's already a big risk. But Hex like even further rewards you with that risk by taking the money that would otherwise go to other people that could have claimed it, like other people that could have joined Hex for free. It takes the money that they just left on the table and it gives it to the people that believed in it the most. Because the amount of like, like right here, you can look at the amount of shares you get in Hex. The longer you stake and the more you stake, the more shares that you get. So somebody who stakes 1 million Hex for the max length of 555, you see that they get 280 trillion shares. But for somebody that staked Hex, say, what would that be? Like 7? Let's say 2228 times 2. So we're off by an order of, so that's 25. Okay, it's 28. We need to bring it down. We're doing some ragtag math here. Okay, that's too high. So 277. There we go. 277. So that's like the midway. I could have just divided 555 by 2. So somebody who did a 2777 stake, they get 236. 236 shares. But someone who did a 5555, they get 280 shares. And so just staking longer just like gives you like just like a larger proportion of the pool. And so like the people that stake the longest during this first year, they also like, not only do they get a larger percentage of just like the daily 3.69% inflation, they also get like a larger proportion of this like launch phase, of these launch phase coins. So like that's kind of like the nature of the claim part of Hex, is that there's this like, the like a major component of the total supply is distributed to all the people that believe in it the most. And so like that's like the incentive to stake the longest, is that like you get a portion of this. But the trade-off is that like in order to get the largest proportion of this, you have to lock up your funds for the longest. And so what that means is like by entering a time lock, you're agreeing to bear the opportunity cost of not being able to sell no matter what happens to price in between. Like say you opened a stake today, and then your stake ends in the year 2030. Like on, this day your stake is over. Like price could, go literally all over the place between here and then. Price could have these crazy runs up, even higher than that, all this, price could go really high, and on these crazy peaks, you couldn't sell your Hex. Like you're giving up the opportunity to sell Hex, until a certain date. You're giving up that opportunity, but you're being rewarded for that by being a majority recipient of the daily inflation that comes out in Hex. So like, part of, where one half of it is this like big payday Hex, But the other part of it that we haven't even talked about yet is just like the daily inflation. So that's like the major incentive, but like there is a lot of risk in that, right? Like, you know, bearing that opportunity cost, you know, maybe like the amount that you earn, like this will be like the big test on if these 15-year stakes are actually give you a higher ROI. Like, will like the amount that Hex goes up before you can unlock your stake, will that be greater? Will like the value of your Hex at this peak be greater than the value of your Hex when your time lock is done, when you now have like say like, you know, 2 or 3 times more Hex than you started with? So like that's going to be the big question is like, you know, is bearing the opportunity cost worth it? And so entering a long-term stake, you're taking the bet that that bearing that opportunity cost is going to pay off, because at the end of this period, you're going to have more Hex and more and that Hex is going to be able to buy you more Bitcoin than the amount of Bitcoin you could have had just selling Hex like at the peak of what it, you know, could have been. That, yes, that factors in that you would have been there ready to sell at that time and sold at the perfect time. But like, that's kind of the benchmark is like, would you have had a chance to sell at a higher price that would have given you more Bitcoin than the amount of Bitcoin you could buy when your Hex time lock unlocks and you now have more Hex than you started with? Like that's going to be the big measuring point. That's going to like, you know, that's a big unknown. And so that's what we're going to see play out. So the Bitcoin claim, that's part of the launch. So that's where like, you know, one portion of this Hex supply goes. So that's like, you know, 8.977 billion or 89 billion comes from there. But every day, so like while this claim is going on, at the same time, there are these daily auctions. They're called the adoption amplifier. I think they could have been named differently. I think they should have been called the auction, or it should have implied that it's an auction, because that's what it is. Calling it the adoption amplifier is kind of confusing. But the way that this works is that every day, so here, let's sort this way. Every day, there's a certain amount of Hex that is available in this auction. And the way that you join this is that you deposit Ethereum into this auction. So Colleen actually just made an awesome video that shows how to do this, which we can share after this. But the way it works is that like there's a bucket of Ethereum that everyone just puts Ethereum into. And based on how much of the Ethereum you put in relative to the total bucket, you got you know, a certain amount of Hex. So like the amount of Hex available is divided amongst this. So like on the first day, there was 1 billion Hex available. And on that day, 21,000 Ethereum was put in. So 21,000. So if we had 1 billion divided by 21, the total amount was like about 47,000. So on this first day, the ratio was 47,000 Hex per ETH. So what's interesting about this first day of Hex was that like there was so much pent up demand from like, you know, because like I'd known about Hex for about a year before it launched. I was like waiting for Hex to launch for about a year. And there's like a race to get in, like to be one of the first people to open up a max length stake. So there was a benefit to getting in on the stake, but the amount of Hex that you got was actually really small, like 47,000 Hex per ETH. So 1 over 47,584 was about 0.00002 ETH. If we look at this chart, let's see, Hex over ETH. Okay, so here, let's zoom in back here. So on the first day that Hex launched, which the Uniswap chart doesn't show because it was, Uniswap wasn't around then. So like 2, what did we say it was? 2.1. So the initial price of Hex was actually pretty high. 0.21. So like, yeah, I guess this kind of does accurately reflect it. So like, if you bought Hex on the first day, you actually sat through a pretty big loss because you bought in, and then so that was about the first day price. It's a little lower than that. Let's put it down. It doesn't really matter exactly what it was, but like on this first, like literally like people who bought Hex on the first day sat through like 2 months of loss. 3 months of like really until it like had this big run up, like everybody who bought on the first day was down. Like being at like buying in on like kind of what we talked about last week, like buying in on the first day, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And that's exactly what happened in Hex. And so like on this first day where, like one ETH got you 47,000 Hex. If you waited till about like the juiciest time to buy Hex was like this pretty much the whole month of January was like the best time to buy Hex. Every day in January, you're getting at least 1 million Hex per ETH compared to 47. So like, so what is that? So 47,584 over say 1 million that people got, like you got literally 96% less Hex than you could have. Like I was in on that first day. Like I have some of the earliest max length stakes ever. I could have had way more Hex had I distributed out differently. Like I was definitely lucky to be buying in on some of these great days to buy, but like my life could have been way different had I just spread it out differently. But that's just the risk. You never know. And part of it is like I wanted to be part of history. So I baked that into it where I was okay with overpaying, and also I didn't know I was overpaying. Well, like you didn't know what the price on the next day was going to be, because what I knew was that the price on the first day was 1 billion Hex, but I knew that the next day it was going to be around 500 million. So I thought this was like going to be like a bit, like I thought the price was going to go up because on the first day there was a billion Hex for sale, and I knew on the second day there'd be about 500 million. So I thought that like price would go up, but it didn't actually. Like that was like the worst. Like luckily I definitely spread it out, but I could have gotten way more Hex than I did. But to me that's okay, because like by now, like when we look at the chart, I would love to buy more at that price. Like that would be awesome if price got back down to where it was. So, that's about like 2.5x from here, or like, so like that's still like a good entry, but that's just part of the risk. You don't know, and then price was lower. Luckily price was lower for so long, and able to get more. But it's pretty funny that like the people like that got in on the first day, they're not doing as well as people that got in like a month after. So that's like where with these things, like you never know what's going to happen. But through this like through this auction process, it mints about 513. It started at 513. Every day it goes down, and in a second I'm gonna show you where this number comes from. But like other than that like initial source of Hex from the free claim, the other initial source of Hex is from this adoption amplifier auction. So every day about 500 million Hex are minted and then distributed to these people that bought in through the adoption amplifier. So every 2 days it's about 1 billion, and this has been going on for 270 days. So 270 over 2, that's like 135. So about 135 billion. So let's just be accurate about it. So 270. So every 270 days, about 500. Say the average is like 512 million. So 138 billion Hex so far have been minted through this process. We'll get more accurate here in a second. And so that'll continue for the remainder of this time. And that Hex actually comes from, so if we go to Etherscan and look up Hex, I'm actually going to show you here in the code where that number is defined. So we go here to B591E. That is the question. So we'll go to this contract OX2B591E. That's how I know. Like I always check to make sure I'm looking at the right one. So let's just try to find in the code where we can find how it calculates the amount of hex that's available in the option. So it's probably called like AA lobby. Let's just kind of search around. I meant to look this up beforehand, but I did not. So let's try to find lobby. Okay, so hex, we're gonna find this. Lobby. Let's see, maybe we can find it by, it's because it's divided by the claim. So pretty much here, I'll find that number later, but what this number is the number of unclaimed Bitcoin divided by 351. So if today, so far, there is 897,123 divided by 351. So did I get that right? 8.9 million. So 25, so that's 25,000. And okay, so then what is the calculation to get the, because what we're trying to get to is we're trying to get to this like today it's 510 million hex. So let's open the, okay, we're gonna look at the Hex layman's guide. We're gonna look up layman's guide. Okay, here we go. I wrote a layman's guide, but there's another. Where can I find the layman's guide? Let's go to hex.com. We're gonna be accurate about this number.
The invention of cryptocurrencies brought us alternatives to the traditional financial system. Hex is the next step in that.
Was that Richard Hart?
No, that was this awesome video that everyone should definitely watch. It's just like a great marketing video for Hex. Okay, so here we go. So we're looking for the adoption amplifier. So this is where you can actually read more of the details of like what we just talked about with like this claim. This is where I learned everything I'm telling you from. So if you want to like keep looking at this, you can. Okay, so here it is. It says every day 1/350th of the unclaimed Bitcoin is converted to Hex. So that means that, so that over 350 times 10,000. Oh, but it's actually 20,000 because let's see. Okay, yes, because it bakes in this referral. So every Bitcoin is eligible to receive 10,000 hex, but if you got it with a referral code, which you can set up here, it's actually 20,000. So when I was saying 10,000, it's actually 20,000. So let's quickly update our spreadsheet here. So I totally forgot about the referral. That's another kind of confusing part about it, is that there's this like referral program during the launch, where if you like use the code that you can create, the person would get like a 10% bonus and you'd get a 10% bonus. So the actual amount is I think so that's where that number comes from. So it's actually 20,000 Bitcoin per hex. And so that's like, so this number 512,000, that's roughly, or 512 million. So it's actually 510 million. So that means we're not very accurate right here. And because this number is decreasing over time, because like the amount that they actually can claim is less. So that's where this number comes from, is number of unclaimed. So unclaimed Bitcoin divided by 350. So that's just like every day of the auction. So times the number of Bitcoin that it could have claimed had it claimed with a referral code. So because we're like claiming with the referral, like you claiming gets 10,000 and the person that whose code used, which could be yourself, they get 10,000. So that's 20,000 total per Bitcoin. And so that's where this number comes from. And so I think this is kind of an interesting part to it, is that like, you know, one, it's just kind of confusing, because if you're looking at this for the first time, you're like, where does that number come from? Like, what is that? Like, I'm not going to buy this because like, I don't know. So that can like push the price down. But like, because it introduces uncertainty and there's risk involved, because like you could buy and like you don't know what the rate's going to be on another day. Like, you know, it has an uncertainty, and the uncertainty gives it energy to like go up in price. So that's what we have here, is just like we have the, like, you know, every day there's like the set amount that's available for sale, and you can calculate what it is by looking at these numbers. And all this is public. It's all on the blockchain. So you can like, you could calculate these yourself to make sure that like what you're seeing on the UI is accurate. But so like every day there's just like 510 million hex that's available. So as you see, like lately there's just like not been that many claims. Times when there's a lot of claiming going on. So when we look back at this chart, when there's a lot of the claims, so like way early on there were a lot of claims, and then there's like another batch of claims in like April and May. So when we look at this, like, so early on, this number's changing a lot, from 513 down through like 511 million. And then it was kind of stagnant. And then when was April? Let's find April. This number starts moving a lot more because more people are claiming. Gets down into 510 millions during like April and May, so like as of now, we're probably going to see less and less. So let's assume that there's going to be 510 million hex for the remainder of this period. So there's 351 minus 270 is 81 days. So 81 times 510 million. You know, so that's the, okay, so let's put this into our, so this is, so the top one's the claiming part here. We're going to format this a little differently. So, so hex auction so far, so to date. So that is, let's say, we're just going to be really rough with this estimate. Let's say the average of all these total is like 511 million. Times 270. So whatever that is, 137 billion, 3, yeah. Is that right? Yeah, that's about right. 137 billion so far. So here, I'm gonna move this. And then hex auction remaining. So what did we say that was? Equals 81 times 510, 496, 123. So, you know, this total number, this amount is going to be about, let's sum those. 179 billion hex is going to be issued through this thing. And then, what is this? So many decimals. Let's turn this into billions. So equals that divided by, so that I don't know how to do scientific notation here. Oh, here, we'll just convert it. So we'll format this one to be in scientific notation. How do we do that? Format. So we can read this. I do not know how to use the software, so let's see. Format, table. Does anyone know how to turn this to scientific notation on here? Category options, here we go. Is that on? Nope. Okay, so other way to do that is we just divide that. So divided by 10 to the 9. So 179 billion. So let's do these in the over 10 up 9. Okay, so this is total AA. So our back of the envelope estimation is going to be 179 billion. That's actually pretty crazy. Maybe that's how it was designed. That's great. That's actually great. Maybe that is how this was designed. These would be really close. So about half the total hex is going to be issued through this adoption amplifier, and then half of the initial hex is going to be through the the free from the big payday where all the unclaimed coins go in. So total, so the total, like, new hex, because that's what this is. This isn't like, it's like where it originates from, is going to be that plus that. So about 358 billion hex total. So this actually isn't all the hex, because what you have to remember is that every day that goes on, as new supply comes online, either, so the three types of supply in hex. So the new supply comes from either the adoption amplifier. It might come through the BTC free claim. So either through the auction, it's called auction, the BTC free claim, and then through the what's it called? Just the inflation. So that's the 3.69% yearly inflation. So like this is where so this is like a daily thing. So every day, whatever the supply is, it goes up by 3.69%. So, or by 3, so if Hex's daily inflation, this sheet is so unorganized, it's 3.69%, or so that's annual. The daily inflation is 3/365. So it's about 1% or point. So it's about 0.01% per day. So like every day that went on, there was, so we can see here, so let's reorder this. Let's go low to high. So on the first day, 370,000 hex was paid to stakers. And so what that means is that on the first day, the total supply of hex was, so let's just do this on our spreadsheet. So on, let's say like first day, what did we say it was? 370,656. So that means that the total supply was, so that was the first payout. So that means that 0.01 times total supply equals that. So that means that this divided by, so let's turn this, so we're gonna make this not what the percent reads, but what the percent is, so 0.0369. So that means that equals that divided by this. So on the first day of hex, the total supply was 1,000 million billion. So on the first day, the hex supply, so after, well, so this was after the first claim. So the first day of claiming and the first, the first one of these auctions. So the 1 billion, and then include, I think that includes this. So there was 1.5 billion hex available through here. And then all of the hex claims on this first day. So another 1.5 billion hex was minted from these claims. So that like 1.5 million minted as part of the free claim. And then the 1.5 billion minted over the first like 2 days, like that. This includes, I just know for a fact that it includes the second day. So like that's where we get this number okay, so actually it includes the, like day 3, because the first day that had a payout. So when we look here, let's look back at this. The payout happens at the end of like a full day. So like on day 1, there was no payout because day 1 started on like, there was like a full day that elapsed where there wasn't any staking. All the staking went live starting on day 2, which was in reality day 3 as far as like the adoption. The adoption amplifier was on day 3 before staking started. Like staking started on day 2. And then the first stakes were available on day 3. So I think that's where that like additional, like from our calculation here, where it's like 3.6 billion, that actually comes from there having been 2 full days of adoption amplifier supply before the first stake had expired. And so that's where like, and so when we look at that number that we calculated, it comes from, the 1.5 billion hex claimed at the first day, plus the roughly 2 billion hex that was, created through, through these, like the first couple auctions. And so the first day of stake inflation was this number, like the 370K. And so like that was this like, daily inflation times the, so like, the first day payout divided by the daily inflation gives you what the supply was on that first day. And so that's where that number comes from. So like every day, like the number of hex that gets paid out goes up because the number that it's dividing by goes up. So because the total supply is increasing every day, at a greater rate than the daily 3.69% inflation, because every day there's this amount of inflation going on from this auction. So like every day there's 500 million hex over this first year. There's 500 million hex that comes online every day. And that's like a massive amount of like daily inflation. So like when we look at the, like what I look at here is the amount of hex that is minted as part of the regular inflation per day versus the number of hex that's minted as part of the auctions. And so when we saw on the transform page, there's about 500 million hex being minted through the daily auction that cuts off in about 80 days from now. And there's only 37 million hex that is created as part of the inflation. So this is like permanent inflation. This is inflation that happens every day forever. But the auction inflation ends in a couple months. So right now, so that's 37921. So 37921, 123 roughly million hex per day, and then the total amount today is like 510 million. And so like the percentage of the percentage of the total inflation that like the regularly scheduled daily inflation is 379 divided by 510. So so what that means is that today 7% of the total inflation is like normal inflation, and then 93% of the daily inflation is the initial launch inflation, where like has to go from like 0 total hex to like the total number that it starts. That's like what, it has to get there somehow. And so it's, it gets there over this period of 350 daily auctions where about 500 million hex per day are minted. And so like when we talk about the Hex Launch Phase, that's what this is this 350-day period where inflation is way above what it's normally going to be. And that's because it has to get to that initial amount somehow, and that could have been anything. Like, and that's like a design decision in like how, the people that created Hex, like that's a decision they had to make. Like, how do we get to like the first set of like, how do we get to the initial supply? Do we do that all at once? They could have done this like on a single day, but like what they emulated this off of was a coin called Eos, which launched over like a 365-day daily auction. And Eos actually had some pretty remarkable like price action over that first period of time, where here, let's zoom all the way out. So Eos launched in middle of 2017. So right here on the first day, just like Hex, crazy FOMO, people bought in, and then it had like a crazy sell-off over the first like more like half year. In Hex, it happened a lot quicker. Eos, it took a lot longer. And then Eos had like a crazy run up. So like their 365-day launch period happened during, it was 350 days, so about 365 days. So this was their launch phase, and Hex's is 350 days. So like maybe where we are in Hex is like right here. Like we had our first, we started high, had a big sell-off. Then we had a crazy run up. And then we've had like a crazy bear market. Maybe like that's exactly where we are in Hex. Like when we look at like, so let's just like look at that chart, and then let's break out the Hex chart. And let's look at that like way, way, way zoomed out. Like, is that where we are? Like, so on the EOS chart, we had this first you know, first big move up, followed by a big move down. And then in Hex, you know, you know, whereas in Hex, you know, price started like up here on the first day, and it went back down. But you know, we go in Hex, we just had, you know, we had our first move up. Let's draw. Oh, I wasn't drawing. Let's draw an arrow. Let's make it green. Make it thick so you can see it. You know, we had our first move up, and then, you know, we had a big, you know, we had our first full bull and bust cycle. And maybe that's where we are in, like, you know, relative, like Hex's launch was emulated off of Eos. And maybe that's right where we are. Like maybe we're right here. Maybe we're gonna, like, leading up to this end, maybe we're gonna have another big move to the upside, because Eos didn't have a big payday. Like Eos, I think, was pretty much all the way just straight down after the launch. But like Eos didn't have 15-year time locking built in. So everyone who bought into Eos, like, probably already sold. But also Eos didn't have the big payday, which was the incentive to, like, time lock. So I actually think that Hex is probably going to repeat what Eos did leading up to the end of this launch phase, in preparation for the big payday. I think people are going to be buying into Hex so that they can stake, so that they can be eligible for that, you know, 9 million Bitcoin worth of Hex that's going to be paid out to the stakers.
Yeah, Brian, can I ask a step in a question here? So do you expect, I mean, actually, when you showed that chart, there were surprisingly, I was surprised how high the percentage of non-staked Hex there was at the moment.
Yeah.
Do you expect those people, I mean, what is it, 100 days for the minimum stake or something like that?
No,
Do you expect, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you can finish your question.
Well, do you expect that money, I mean, I'm even willing to stake for 120, you know, if I've got, say, 10,000 Hex sitting there, I certainly don't want to have it just non-staked, you know, on day 350.
Yeah. So,
but maybe people want to be more liquid in it too.
Yeah. So, I wish somewhere we could show, actually, that's actually a great kind of segue into kind of where we're going from here is like, so far we've roughly estimated how much Hex there's going to be at the end of this launch phase, and how much is going to be available for the stakers. So we got that done. So, like, what she's asking about is, like, what the number of Hex stakers are going to be, like, and how that's changed. So we can actually look at the you know, we're actually going to build we're going to build our own visualization from scratch, just so we can fully answer the question that we're trying to answer. So on Hex Division, we're going to go look at the block data. This is going to tell us, like, so this tells us timestamp, block number, total Hex supply, total circulating Hex, so the number of unstaked coins, how many are locked, and the interest rate. So that's like the interest that the average length, average size staker gets if they have stakes open. So that's what that means. And so let's go ahead and click one of these, and we're just gonna, so we care about this, we care about the percent locked. So we're gonna click visualize, and let's change this. So the y-axis, we're gonna change it to maximum. I'll explain this in a second. X-axis, we're gonna change this to be the timestamp. And we're going to make that a date histogram, and then we're going to hit update. What is that warning? It's getting a maximum of percent locked. Okay, so This shows the percent that was locked, during like the initial phase. So you can see it's gone down. So there are a couple of reasons why. One is that everybody who claimed for free, they had a minimum time lock of 1 year. Like anyone who claimed for like 90% of the free hex that they got was automatically staked for a year. And that was to prevent people from just claiming it and then dumping the price down. So that's like part of it. And to give people like, a reason to look at Hex for a whole year and get to know it and become more familiar with it and potentially like put more money in. So it's like part of a marketing like technique, I think. So at that time when the majority of the total supply was Hex that was minted as part of the state of like the free claim, the amount of like Hex that was locked was like really high. Like up here it was like in the 80s%. And then it started going down just as like, because every day, like at this point, like, let's try to look at the total, let's add to this chart. We're going to add the total supply. So we're going to add the total supply. Total Hex, here we go. And then let's, so that probably, let's see, okay, I know that we're gonna have to change we have to add let's see. So total Hex, we're gonna give this a new axis and it's gonna be normal. And we're gonna do that a line chart. Okay, so you see how fast the total Hex supply is increasing? Like, so every day that goes on, there's like this new Hex that's minted as part of the auction. So the 500 million Hex minted per day, plus the, what's it called? Plus the Hex that's minted as part of the claims, which is small now, but it was larger earlier on. And that's what the total amount of Hex is growing by. So like Hex is actually like the inflation rate of Hex. So here, like this is like the total supply per day. That's like really, really high. So if we even add, like, let's add another thing here. We're gonna measure what that rate is real quick. So we're gonna look at the y-axis. We're going to do a derivative. So we're going to measure the rate of change over time of the total supply. And then, wait, that one. Okay, so here we go. So this is kind of hard to like totally fully unpack, but like the derivative it's like about 1.362. I think this is over a 2-day period. This is how it's measuring the derivative. I'll have to check, but so that divided by what the total supply is on any given day is like what the like inflation rate is. So like right now, like today, like over this period of time, 1.36 billion over the total supply of Hex, which is, let's get this on its own. Let me get this on its own axis. Where is the total supply one? Max percent locked. Are we using it? Can we get rid of that? Okay, percent locked. And we have the, okay, so we need to add back we messed up and so let's just look at the max of the total Hex. Okay, so this is the scaling. Okay, now we need to put this on its own axis. That's it.
Okay.
There we go. All right. So today the total hex is about 362 billion, and it's increasing at a rate of about let's just say $1 billion a day, just because like that's just what this says. So 1.3 over, what did we say, 360? So like right now, Hex's daily supply inflation is about 0.0036%. So times 365. So that is like as of right now, under current conditions, if this was extrapolated over a year, the total Hex inflation rate is about 131%. So that seems really high. That's like Zimbabwe. I mean, that like Zimbabwe is way worse. Like, that's like a really high inflation rate, but that's only during this first 365 days. During the time where there's this like whole batch of Hex that's minted purely from the inflation or from the adoption amplifier auction. So like, right now that the supply of Hex is really high. And so all that new Hex is coming online and it's not staked. So every day that goes by, it's just pushing the percent, like, so this purple bar graph, it's just pushing that down because the difference in the rate at which this is increasing versus the rate that this is decreasing, that's the rate at which new people are staking. Because like every day, like, a whole new batch of supply comes online that's not staked. And so like that adds, that increases the denominator. And so, that's why this like total percent is going down. And then also it started going down when the Hex price started moving up. So like, it looks like this was about, when was this? Like, February, it got down and then it really started going down, much, like April through May and even carrying on. So part of it is just like the new supply. Part of it is because when Hex had this like first like crazy price run, where's our Hex chart? To our Hex site. Okay, so like back in February, Hex had it went up by about 400%, and then it had a retrace. So people saw that Hex had the potential to go up a lot. And so that started in like from January to February. And so when that happened, like it showed that Hex could be a good short-term sell. And so people started staking less. So like January through February is when that was happening. So pretty much like this first dramatic decrease in the amount staked. Like early on, people that were buying Hex were staking for a long time because, everyone who was like in it early on, they were into the whole staking thing. They didn't really I did not expect Hex to moon as fast as it did. I was like, okay, this is a long-term hold thing. Like it'll probably go up, but like probably not that fast. Because it's going to attract long-term holders, not just like day traders. And like day traders are like what can pump the price in like a short period of time. But when Hex had that first 400% move, people wanted to keep more Hex liquid so they could like sell when it was like a good opportunity. So like that was like kind of this first like contributor to like why the Hex percent stake, the amount of Hex that's locked was going down, was because like Hex showed that it had potential for like 400% moves. And little did we all know that was like the first of like many, and then between February and March, Hex had another had a 400% move followed by a 60% sell off, followed by a almost 300% move, followed by no sell off, and then followed by like this that move that really put us on the map. And so like when price, had these like, within a couple months, there were like two, like over 300% moves, and that was happening, between this period of time from, January all through like May. Like people see that it can go up a lot. And so they wanted to have some Hex liquids they could like, sell. So like that, like, so that's, so the combination of just like this like really high inflation rate combined with Hex showing that it can pump, that decreased the amount of Hex that is staked. And so that's actually good for stakers, because what that means is that like some that we've mentioned in the past, and this is like core to Hex, is that the amount of Hex that you get at the end of your stake is, so let's look at the stake end. We're going to look at so this is the function in the software that runs when you end your stake. So stake end, let's see. So right here. So let's see, stake end. Is that the one? Let's see. Actually, here's where I found it. So big. Okay, so when it's calculating your payout reward, so your payout is equal to, so the total amount that's paid out that day times the number of stake shares that you get divided by the total number of stake shares that day of everybody. So when we look at here, like if we were to open up a stake right now, if we were to open up a 1 million Hex stake for 555,000 days, we are going to get 280 trillion shares. And right now, if we look here, I think that's one that we can pull up. Right now, there is, let's see if this shows us the number of real-time shares. If we add one, okay. We're gonna have the max of the shares. Okay, the other one's gonna show, this group of data doesn't show the shares, so we're not gonna look at that. I think on Hex Live it shows total shares. Yeah, total shares. So 9.9 exa shares. So that's like 9.9, okay, quintillion, E for quintillions. So that's 10 to the 18, and the number of shares.
Quintillions.
Yeah, so total, there's, 10, so what was that, like 10 quintillion? And what is trillion is, that's 10 to the 12, so billion is 10 to the 9, trillion 10 to the 12. So 10 to the 18 divided by 10 to the 6 is million. So like if we were to open up, I think that's right, we may have to check the math there, but if we open up a 1 million Hex stake for 555,000 days, we would get 280 divided by 1 million. So we would have 0.028% of the total amount. Okay, but it was 10 million. So we would get, so let's multiply by 100 just so we can see it in percents. So we would get 0.0028% of the total shares that exist today if we were to open up this stake. And so like your shares are what, like that's like your percentage. So like that number we just calculated, like if we were to end a stake, or if we were to calculate how much we would be getting, it's like your stake shares divided by the total. And so it's just like the percent of the pool that you have times what the day's daily payout is. So it's that simple. Like this is this is literally like, this is what defines the amount you get when you end your stake. And what's so remarkable about this is that like so many people that like missed out on Hex, or like people that are part of like kind of like the crypto like mainstream, like Hex is very like on the fringe. Like there's a lot of hatred towards people in Hex, just because like Hex has all these moving parts, and it has things like these like bonuses and like names like Big Payday, and it like promotes the price going up, and it promotes like the interest rate you get. Like people think it's a scam. Like a lot of the traditional Bitcoin people, like Bitcoin people are really conservative, and like they don't like all this other stuff. But like Hex is definitely on the more like people who are more like experimental and open to different types of monetary policy than just like flat total supply that like goes out like on the halving cycle. Like Bitcoin's monetary policy is like pretty conservative, whereas Hex's monetary policy is like pretty radical. Like it's the first thing that's ever existed like this. But what's so beautiful about it to me is that like, and what made me like truly know that it's not a scam, like, is that like you can go in and read the code, and it's written so well that like you like, even you as like someone who doesn't really know, like I don't know Solidity. That's the language this is written in. Like I'm a developer, but I don't know this at all. But like I can go in here and I can reason about like how this works. And it's so simple, like where like this is like what your daily payout is. It's like the amount you get when you end your stake. It's calculated in about 20 lines of code, where, for every day. So this is what it's saying. It's like every day from when your stake began to where your stake ended, it's looping through there, and it's generating a value called your payout. So every time this loops through a day, it adds up what the amount was paid out that day plus the amount of stakes that, or the amount that's paid out times your proportion of stakes open on that day divided by the total number of shares that were open on that day. So like that's your daily payout, and it loops through every day from the start to when your stake ends. And then here's where it adds the big payday. So what this means is like if the beginning day was less than the big payday and the end day of the stake was after big payday, meaning it started before big payday and ended after, your amount of the big payday slice equals the amount of total unclaimed Bitcoin times the number of hearts, which is just like the minimum, the decimal of Hex. So times the amount of Hex per Bitcoin times your proportion of the share pool, of the stake pool. So like that's how you can know like what the amount you're going to get at the end of big payday is actually going to go to you, because you can look at the code and say, okay, the total number of unclaimed coins times the number of Hex per unclaimed Bitcoin times my proportion of the Hex rate, that's going to get added to my payout. And so like that's what your payout is. That's how it's calculated. Literally in these simple lines of code, that's like what the amount that you're going to get. And so like, if you don't believe that like there's a thing like big payday, if you think that's a scam, you can actually go in here and read the line of code that like defines what it is. And you can see that like it's not like some like hand wavy thing. It's like actually part of the code. So like that's really the beauty in this, is that like you can validate for yourself that this is going to happen, because whatever is like, because when you're like going on MetaMask to like end a stake or open a stake, you're actually running this code. Like you're calling functions in this code. So like you're the one running this code, and it gives you, and like by default, you can see all the code that's involved. So like, that's what we can look forward to is like when, when the stakes end, you can like, you're going to get like, a big portion of this pool, but you get it when your stake ends. So on day 351, that's when we'll know how many are going to go out and what the number of stake people are. It's probably going to go up, but that's when we will know how much you'll get. And then you can look forward to the end of your stake, because that's when you're going to get it. So that's what we, what we're going to be looking out for is, as we reach day 351. So here, let's, we're going to put this in the future. So how many days is that from now? So today it is day 271. So 351 minus 271. So 80 days from now. So we're going to change this in. So 81 days from now. Okay. So that's where we are right now. So this will continue. This line will continue as is till then. This percentage of Hex staked, I think it's going to start going up, and it's probably going to go up like right at the end, because like everybody, like everybody's going to prepare for that big payday. So everyone's
I wondered about that. I wondered if everyone who just has it loose out there is all of a sudden just going to be like, even if it's for what's the minimum, 100 days or something.
So the minimum is actually going to be 1 day at that. Like if you stay on day 350, as long as you have like a stake, like as long as it like lasts till after it, you're going to get a portion of it. But like say on day 350, you did a 2-day stake that included that includes that, like say you had 1 million Hex and you're going to get 93 trillion Hex shares for your 2-day stake. That's going to be like a tiny amount relative to the whole. And so you'll get some of it, but it's not going to be very much. Like the majority of this amount is going to get paid out to the people at the end of the time locks, because they're going to get the majority of it, and it becomes unlocked to them when their stake ends. And so the people who have stakes ending, let's open up in a new window. So right here, it shows everybody from now until the next 15 years. So this is 2035 when those 15-year stakes start ending. So like this red bar that you can see here, it's the number of stakes, it's the Hex stakes that are expiring. And then this like background one is the number of shares that are expiring. So that's a measure of how many like Hex time locks are coming undone. And so this shape, like this chart, is actually a really good proxy for what the inflation is going to look like, during that phase in the middle. Because like right now, like, so when let's just add a new sheet here. So like in launch phase, the daily inflation is about, what is that? That like 500, it was like about 1 billion Hex per day. Because what I didn't calculate in there, which I messed up on when I was explaining earlier, just quickly. So with that referral bonus, like it's 10,000. It's like this amount of Hex is available, but then if you use a referral code, you get like another 10%. So it like adds to that. So like this number is actually a little bit higher than what it is displayed here, but that doesn't really matter. It's still fine for the sake of our thing. So let's just based on what the chart is. So every day there's 510 million Hex per day, and that's constant. So there's that, and then so there's that fixed rate plus the 0.0369 over 365 daily inflation. So we have like this first phase where it's like this 510 per day plus 0.01% per day inflation that's happening. So that'll continue from there. And then there's like this like second phase, which is from day 351 to day, what's 5? So 555 plus 5 or 351. So that's going to be like 5916. Did I get that right? Equals 351 plus 5555. 5906. Okay, so day 5906. So that is all the people that have time locks ending on the day after big payday. So it's actually day 352, 5907. So during this period of time, there's no like, let's add another column here. So this is like AA auction inflation. And then this is inflation. And then there's big payday inflation. So let's do this. So then move this down a slot. And then there's big payday inflation. So here that's 0. Here that's, that there's percentage. And so now what we're going to see is over this period of time, all those unclaimed hex, which where did we calculate what that was? So the big payday total hex that's going to be distributed is going to be 179 billion hex. So let's copy that figure. So there's going to be 179 billion divided over this period of time. So I'm going to divide that by 5907 minus 351. So we can see on average how many that's going to be per day. But in a second, I'll show you why it's not going to be fully accurate. It's just like estimation. So about 32 million hex per day is going to be like is going to be added to the inflation. So like from the big payday, but it's actually not going to be like this would be assuming it would be a straight line where like every day, like, 5,555, would be, the 179 billion divided by that, but it's not, because it's actually going to be more at the end and less at the beginning. Because at the beginning, it looks like there's 65 trillion hex shares expiring, but at the very end, there's like 984. So 9 million trillion. So like all the, like this is like the remainder of all the hex, and like since so many more of them are going to be like towards this tail end, since like people's shares like are weighted towards the longer term stakers, the like early on it's actually going to be smaller than like, so maybe in the beginning this number, like let's just like break it down, so like beginning, middle, and end. So maybe what this means is that like in the beginning, maybe on average there's going to be like, I don't know, 15 million hex per day as part of this big payday inflation. During the middle, it's going to be about what the average is. And then at the end, it's going to be higher than that. So like 64. So these are estimates. And this is like amplified by the daily inflation. So like, like every day that goes on, like right now, if we look at the total payout, this is like that like 1%, that like like the 3.69% divided by 365 days. this is that like 0.01% of the total supply, which every day is going up by the amount that's issued through the transform auctions. So like right now, this is like artificially high daily inflation because it's being divided because every day on top of it, the inflation is increasing by the amount that's coming out through this auction. So it's like unnaturally high right now because there's this like other form of like launch phase inflation that like, isn't going to like, that's not permanent. So if we, it's like, so every day there's, this amount that's going to be coming out, and then it's like that daily inflation that applies across the board. So like, that's, for all days. It's just like higher. So it's higher here. It's still high here. So during this time, so like the inflation rate is actually going to be increasing it's going to be lower than it was here, but it's actually going to be increasing over time. It's going to look a lot like this chart. Where are we? So day 350 is right here. And every day that goes on, all these stakes that are ending, they're going to be getting their proportion of that big payday. And so the ones that are ending up here aren't going to get it as much as the people that are ending back here, because the longer your stake is, the more shares you get. The more shares you have, the more of the inflation you get. So like this like cumulative shares expiring is actually like a good representation of what that like is going to look like. So if we were to like look at, I'm going to pull up a Google, or it's called Keynote on Mac. So, oh, that's cool. Let's pull it up. So let's go to let's add a blank slide. Okay, we'll put it here because that's like just an awesome graphic. So what we're gonna just like kind of roughly draw here is what the Hex daily inflation is going to look like during these three phases. So if we have phase one, so phase one, let's make this like blue. Phase two, we're going to make it green. And phase two, we will make it magenta. Here, we're actually going to make these more like the hex colors. So it's going to go hex there to orange. Let's find a nice orange. So this is like let's group these. Taller. So this is like what so phase one, phase two, phase three. So these aren't quite to scale because phase one is tiny, like 350 days. Phase two is 5,555 days because this accounts for everybody that opened up a stake the day before big payday through that like 5,555 days that big payday payments are applied. So this isn't quite to scale. So here's what we can do. We're going to make that like that, and then we'll adjust this size too. So this isn't quite to scale. And then this one will carry on forever. So during phase one, we have, let's pull this just so it's in sight. So that's like per day. That's the average of that. So day one, we're increasing at a rate of, on average, we're increasing at a rate of, let's just say like this is like the daily inflation rate, because like when we looked at this chart that we made over here, it's pretty constant. So like if we, and then like this derivative, so that's like the rate of change, it's pretty flat. So like this is like what we're drawing here is on our like little graphic is this line, that derivative line. So that's what that is right there. So blue, let's make it thicker. So phase one, like we have this like daily inflation. Let's go ahead and just move this stuff over here. Okay, you know what we're gonna do here? We're actually gonna get rid of this one. So this is what it really looks like. So phase one, phase two, phase three. This is like when Hex is working as normal. We're going to be in the galaxies because the price is going to be so high, and our stakes are going to be tripling, quadrupling in amount. So during phase one, we had our daily inflation of, let's just say it was, this is all just estimate, so about 500 to a billion per day. So that's what the daily inflation is there. And then what we have starting here, like during phase two, is the daily inflation abruptly jumps down. But every day that goes on, it actually increases, because as we see here, like early on, since like those people have less shares than people at the end, they're going to be getting less inflation. But there's going to be more of those people than at the end. So like those like add up, like they sum up. But then like as it gets towards the end, the inflation is going to increase because people at the end are going to be receiving a majority of this pool. So it's probably going to look something like the date, like the inflation is probably going to look something like, let's see, let's bring to front. Why is that working? Okay, why can't I draw? Okay, so during this time, I don't know like what the actual number is going to be, but I do know that, why is this working? Why can't I do this? I have no idea how to use Keynote. So here, we'll just use different ones. So early on, it's going to be like, since the inflation is heavily weighted towards the end, over the first period of time, it's probably going to be going like that. Let's make this a little thicker. Then over this next period of time, it's going to kind of taper out, but still be going up. And then at the end of this time, it's going to be like, more tapered off. And that'll be the inflation. And I don't know whereabouts this will be. So like, let's group these all together. I'm uncertain about when this is going to be, because like it's not going to be higher than this, but I'll have to do some more calculation to see exactly like what this rate, and this is all just like for example anyways, where like every day it was increasing at this rate. I'll add a slight increase to this because that is more realistic. And then during this time, it kind of has this behavior because towards the end of these stakes, these people who have the majority of the shares are going to be they're going to be the ones getting the most of that inflation. So, it'll increase up to day 3, like 5.5. So this is day, let's put a marker here. So this is day 5.5.5.5. Let's make that. Let's go ahead and copy one more of these. So this is day, that's not 5.5.5, that's day 3.5. What did we say it was? Day 5.907. And then this is like forever. So like during this period of time, there's really high inflation. During this next period of time, there's lower inflation, but it is still high because there's the big payday inflation rate. But then at the end, once Hex is all said and done, once all the big payday coins have been paid out, there's a constant 3.69% inflation rate. So let's So like, I was hoping we'd be able to calculate these. I think it's going to take a little trial and error and like probably some programming to like fully calculate something accurate. But I think what we got here was pretty accurate, where like we're here looking at like the daily inflation per hex phase. So this is like day, so 0 to 351. So this is the launch phase. This is BPD phase. And this is, what should we call this last phase? Let's name it here.
The like winners phase.
Winners phase.
Winners.
Like if you survived up till this date, you've countered COVID, the next virus is, whatever climate change throws at us, whatever threats the government throws at us. Like if you survive, so let's call it survivors phase.
Survivors phase.
Survivors phase.
We're surviving all the disclosure, everything.
Like if you survive through everything that the world throws at us during this time, you'll get the benefit from, both of these. Like every time, like how, like, so let's compare this to the Bitcoin halving. So let's look at the Bitcoin halving chart. Wow, I spelled that so bad. So you see this, how actually we're right here now. Wow, this is a great chart. I've never seen this page before. Holy shit. So like in Bitcoin, like Bitcoin's launch, like you can kind of call these phases, or you can call this whole thing as one phase, where like Bitcoin gets to its total supply after 32 little sub phases. So we're right here. We just had the halving in May. So we're about right here, where the yearly inflation rate is about 1.8%. And it dwindles down to 0. So like, let's see if we can. So like, you see how it kind of like steps down in this fashion? like boom, boom, boom. Hex kind of has something similar to that, where like up here, the inflation rate during this time is pretty high because every day that goes on, there's all of these new hex that are minted as part of the adoption amplifier. Plus, there's all the hex that are minted as part of the free claim. Plus, there's, which we didn't even factor into here, so which is fine. We mainly care about the uniform inflation. So like hex during this first period of time has really high inflation. Then suddenly the inflation rate is going to cut, not in half, I think more than half. So it actually might be more powerful than a Bitcoin halving. But hex inflation cuts down here, and then during this period of time, which is about 50, it's a 15-year period of time, the inflation rate actually, I need to go back, like this is what I'm going to go back and really calculate like what this curve looks like. It's going to be a function of what, this is, that cumulative hex shares per day ended. Where did we find that? It's going to be something kind of like this, I'll need to do more calculation on that, but the inflation rate of hex is going to look something like that. During the time when there's the regularly scheduled daily inflation, and then on top of that, there's the big payday inflation, but there's no adoption amplifier inflation. So it's going to look something like that. But then when that's done, abruptly, it's going to cut to 3.69% yearly inflation. And so kind of how like the hex, the Bitcoin, let's see if we can find it. Like these Bitcoin halvenings led to the boom and bust cycles. So if we go to Bitcoin halvening chart, I saw some. So where do we see that? So like, how we saw these like in Bitcoin, like every halvening leads to like a boom and bust cycle. Like within each one, there's like a boom and bust cycle. That's probably what we're seeing play out right now in Hex. Where like in Hex, during this first phase, we saw a, it's like initial, boom. Let's change that to green. And we'll make that thicker. So we saw, a boom and bust cycle in Hex. Price went up a lot. And now let's make this one red and change it to more thick. Hex had like a, boom, bust. And then like, that's where we're at now. We've lived through like the first boom and bust cycle of Hex. So, kind of like on this Bitcoin chart, there was like the first boom and bust cycle leading up to that first halving, leading up to that first supply shock. Because this will be a big supply shock. Because suddenly there will no longer be these 500 million hex minted per day as part of the auction. So leading up to that, maybe the market is going to start like repricing that in. So like, let's draw like a blue line. That's going to go, oh shoot. Sorry, I'm trying to still learn how to use this tool. We'll probably see like a, like a blue line here, leading up to that. So maybe we might not even return to all-time highs. So let's make that blue. We'll make it thicker. So like this might be like what the like per inflation block. So like like per inflation phase. If we see one of these like boom bust continuation cycles, like that's probably what we'll see leading into the next one. Where let's copy that and then we'll drag it over. Let's go ahead and group those just so they can stick together. Maybe this, oh shoot. Maybe that's what this starts to look like, where Like maybe that's what this next 15 years looks like, where like the market is like, because like part of what's helping like pushing the price of Hex down is that like this initial wave of euphoria is kind of gone, and like the initial wave of FOMO is gone, and there's a lot of this supply pushing down the price. And so like after like this first big supply shock, when the inflation rate goes from this really high rate during phase 1 to this lower rate at phase 2, when the market responds to that with like probably like a big push to the upside, when that FOMO and the hype and hysteria kind of wanes off, and then it's facing pressure, downwards pressure from this above normal inflation, like we may see like a multi-year bear market, like especially like because that'll like this will probably be around halfway through, so maybe in like about 4 years, or like that'd be what in like the first quarter. So like the average length staker ends at that time, so like it might be pretty brutal for the average stakers, because from their perspective, they they were experiencing no benefits of inflation, because the whole entire Hex supply increased at a rate that was similar to the rate at which their own Hex supply increased. So they didn't lose to inflation. It wasn't deflationary from their perspective, but it wasn't, but like, and it wasn't inflationary from their perspective. They pretty much broke even. So like, it might be pretty brutal to them, because like during this time, like the market has, will have, seen, it's like already gone through like the price run that was caused from the supply shock from the inflation decreasing from this rate to here. So that like initial price run is probably gonna be gone. And then the market is gonna be like pricing in the like many years. So what is that gonna be? Like, 6 to 10 years of pretty high inflation rate. So like that's, where people's stakes are ending, big paydays are ending, people are going to be selling off, a lot of these shorter term time horizon people, they're going to be selling off. So like, it could be a long, bear market when there's a lot of this supply coming online ready to be sold, and maybe some of the hype and hysteria from the supply shock is gone. And then, when the market starts to remember that, oh, wait, on day 5,907, there's going to be another massive supply shock when we move to the time where there's no, all the adoption amplifier inflation's gone. That's been gone for a while. But there's been this daily big payday inflation, which is going to increase towards the end, because the people at the end are going to get the majority of it. And as we lead up to the survivors phase, where like the inflation rate goes down to where it is meant to be, like the market is going to start preparing for this supply shock. So that's what this like continuation upwards is going to be. Where like at this point, people are going to start buying Hex because they know that the inflation rate is going to decrease. They like, it's like the same, like for the people that bought, like when we were buying Hex or buying Bitcoin leading up to the halving, because we're preparing for the inflation rate to cut in half, and there to suddenly be less Bitcoin for sale. A similar thing's going to happen in Hex, where like as we're leading up to the time where the inflation is going to be paid paid out to everybody, and that's going to be coming to an end. Like, maybe that's like what we'll see here. And then let's, markets kind of repeat themselves. So let's just copy and paste that. So maybe this is what Hex's life cycle looks like, where, early on price has a first boom and bust cycle because it's like, very high inflation. Next phase, inflation abruptly goes down, but it's still kind of increasing over time. So it's a little bit tapered off, still, goes through one of these market cycles preparing for a supply shock. And then, now, maybe the price action looks a little bit different because at this point, there's no more supply shocks. Everything is going to remain the same. So, one scenario is that like the market just like kind of repeats itself from what it experienced in the past, because that's what people who are going to be trading this are going to be looking at. They're going to look at past price because that's all they can like really base what it's off of. So maybe it's, kind of looks like normal like market activity where it's just like push exhaustion, these like normal like bear and bull cycles. But maybe the chart just starts to look a little bit different, because at this time, what's going to become clear, it's like right now, it's like if you look at the math, you can tell that like you're going to get a higher ROI the longer you can stake. So like that's only obvious if you like trust the math. Like it hasn't been seen yet. Like we haven't been around long enough to experience a 15-year stake. But once the full 15-year stake cycle ends, and everyone can look back at all the stakers and say, wow, the people that staked for longer, they got a way larger percentage of the inflation. Like they had a much larger ROI. Maybe what that ends up becoming is that like maybe instead of like, these like normal boom and bust cycles that we're used to, because we're mainly conditioned on Bitcoin, which is like has these like halvenings. Maybe something different happens with Hex where like there aren't these like, it's not preparing for a supply shock, and it has the incentive to where like you're going to have a higher ROI if you stake for longer. And if you stake for longer, you're removing coins from the supply. So you're helping decrease the total supply, which helps push the price up. So maybe what we have to look forward to is in the survivor era, if we survive till then, which I know we all will because we put good energy into the world. Maybe what this looks like. So let's make this like a yellow line. Let's make it a 21 point. Maybe Hex just pumps forever because people are going to be buying Hex, locking it up, buying Hex, locking it up. And that's like what we want. Like as a holder of a coin, you want to buy coins that people are going to buy and hold on to for many years. And after this period of time, it'll become very clear that the best strategy in Hex is the long-term stake. And so people are going to be buying Hex with the intention of staking for a long period of time. So that's, maybe we see like price just like run to infinity, and like, maybe we're the new oligarchs. Maybe we're the new world power. We're the new world order. It could be us and all these weirdos in Hex.
I'm in.
Like,
I love it.
That could be it, because like every day, like so my Hex staking strategy, I'll have to pull up like a screenshot of it. I think I've shared it with y'all before. I don't
know if I've seen it. I'd be very curious, Brian.
Let's see. I'm not going to share it now because we're on live right now. So
I know, and we're like it's long too.
We'll talk about the Hex ladder a little bit later once I can pull it up. But it pretty much looks like a. You know what? Here, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. I'm gonna pull it up, and then I'm pause my screen share so we're still on camera. Let me pull up my staking ladder, and I'm just gonna hide the amounts and dates. One moment. Daniel, do you know how many people are watching live, or has anyone tuned in live? You have to look on DLive or something. That's so funny. When I pulled up hex.live, I was looking at one of the whale addresses, and I was like, that's mine. And I was like, okay, that's not me. I had it open for someone else's. Let me pull up my staking ladder. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen again. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so these are when my stakes are ending. So in between now and 15 years from now, so I have them like kind of stacking up here. So I set these like on like days into Hex, like when I first bought my first amount. So it was really over the first like 2 months of Hex is when I set these. And this was done, but way before like everything that I explained right now, it took me a couple months to like really grasp this. I did not fully grasp like what the ROI would be for longer term stakes. So a lot of these smaller stakes that I had peppered in here, I set those like way before I knew what was going on. And so I wish I would have like all these like little stakes. I wish that those were just one big stake in like 15 years. Like I thought it was like prudent and safe to like, do one of these types of things. And I mean, this is still a good strategy, because like what we were talking about earlier is like what you're trading off. Like when you do a stake, you're giving up the opportunity cost. Like you're paying the opportunity cost to not be able to sell into one of these pumps, like, and so, I wish that I had more in my average stake length is like 9 years. And I'm pretty sad. Like I am pretty satisfied with where I am in my standing of all Hex stakers. Like it's a lot like where I stand in terms of Hex shares is much higher than where I stand in terms of my Hex amount to the total amount. And that means that like I'm in like the way above average stake length class, like per Hex. So like I'm pretty satisfied with that. But just like if I knew everything I knew now, I would be way more on the longer side, because like I'm not really like looking to like I view Hex as like a retirement account. So like I'm satisfied. Like I'm satisfied with what I earn and what I just like from like the software development work that I do, and I'm like confident that that's going to be growing too. Over this same period of time. And so like, I'm not really looking to like cash out on my Hex. Like, I'm not really looking to Hex to like deliver me like a better lifestyle, like in the 2020s. Like I'm looking for Hex to like deliver me like a good like retirement lifestyle, when I'm like way older and like, but like I'm looking to be independently wealthy, like outside of Hex. Like I'm not like by no means am I banking on Hex to like change my life. I mean, it already has changed my life in a lot of ways. Mainly with what it's taught me, but like, it's like financially, like I wish that I would have known everything I know now about like the value of the long-term stakes when I was setting these stakes. And so, that's why this looks like this, but like, who knows, maybe this is going to like earn me more Hex than it otherwise could have, because like what this means is like, every year I have a couple stakes ending, and maybe those and all these stakes are going to get part of the big payday bonus. So they're all probably going to at least double. I don't know. I don't know what that amount's going to be, but like the amount of them is going to go up. They're going to be earning, at least like 24% yearly interest on it. So like at least, every year that goes on, it's like add 20%, and plus the big payday. So like these are going to pay out really nicely. And it's like, every couple of months I'm just going to have like a big payday, from the Hex that I bought when it was worth nothing. So like that's going to be, pretty good. And maybe they'll be timed, during like, these, like, hopefully they come unlocked like on the day of like a massive pump, and I can just like sell and rejoice at the ROI on that one. But I'd feel pretty sad if the price kept pumping and I sold, but probably what's going to happen is like, I'm going to just segue these into every one that comes undone, like every one that comes unlocked. I'm probably just going to start a new 15-year stake. So like, maybe I don't know
Really?
if it's the total amount, but like, I'm just going to load up my life from year 2035 to year 2050. So like, probably, me in my like 40s to 50s, that's going to be like, I'm going to be living off of 15-year stakes that are going to be, so because what that means is that like every day, like, so during like phase 2, all the big payday stakes are going to be coming off and they're going to be pretty high. Like the inflation rate's going to be pretty high. But during this survival era, like once Hex is in its like stable state, like, no more big payday, no more adoption amplifier, the inflation rate's going to be relatively low. And if every day I am one of the longest stakers to end on that day, I'm going to be getting a massive amount of the yearly inflation. So like, because every single day that goes on, like if you think about it, like, so like, look right here, like, so in year 2035. So, okay, let's just look here. Like, so I think this day where I have most of mine, this was the first day that max length stakes were available. I've added some 15-year stakes after that. But I think this was the first, like this is day 350, or this is day 5555. On this day, there are going to be stakes ending of everybody who started a stake from day 1 till day 555. So these people who started their stakes, they will have 5,555 days of interest getting paid to them. The people that started the day before, they have 1 day of inflation getting paid to them. And the people that had the short stake, they're getting a less amount because longer pays better. Like when we look at the like the Hex contract code, let's see if we can find longer pays better. So right here, it shows you all the math. So longer pays better at a rate of 20% per day over a year. I think that's how to interpret that. So let's see. If longer than one is committed, each extra day gives bonus shares of approximately 0.058, approximately 20% extra per year. So every extra year you stake, you get an extra 20%. And so like you're already going to be like by being in a 15-year stake, you're already going to be earning more shares of the inflation pool than someone who stakes like for a couple days. And then on top of that, every day that goes on, the people that had entered long-term stakes before you, their stakes are expiring. And so those shares are no longer in the pool. So like, every day that goes on, like the amount of Hex inflation that's allocated to you gets like added up. And it's based on how many people have shares open that day, have stakes open that day. So like, midway through this time, if a lot of people's stakes end, those shares are no longer competing for the Hex inflation. So like as people's stakes end before you, your stakes continue to earn more. And then on this day, like, yours is like the longest stake ending that day. And so like between those two facts, like you're like the 15-year stakes are just going to like, because like the average length staker gets 3.69% if everybody's staked, but you're like way above average, you're getting way more of that supply. So if all of these stakes that I had here, they're going to be ending during a time of high inflation, so maybe like, might not be the best time to sell these because like there's just so much inflation coming online from the big payday. But if I turn these into 15-year stakes, like imagine this thing, like, so this chart just like copying itself, but after the year 2035, where instead of like these ones where like, these stakes are like 1 year stakes. These stakes are 2 year stakes. These stakes are 8 year stakes. These stakes are 12 year stakes. And so like, they're not getting like that 15-year share rate for like how much of the inflation pool you get. All of these are going to be 15-year stakes. So the inflation, like, so that I get for having those, like a staking ladder, it's going to be massive. Like right now, like every stake that comes offline up until my end, each one gets bigger as time goes on because like the stake was longer to start with. But now if like I'm restarting the cycle where everyone is a 15-year stake, it's like everything is going to be that like massive payout. And since like a lot of the people that are in Hex, I like when we look at this right here, wrong chart. So not the free claim. So right here, there's like a lot of Hex, like a lot of the long-term stakes end at 10 years. So there's kind of 2 reasons for that. One, when we look at the code, it's capped to 200%. So it means that this 20% is capped for 10 years. So like the extra longer pays better bonus, it actually tapers off after 10 years. Like you don't get more shares by having a 15-year stake from the bonus than you would for having a 10-year stake. But you have 5 more years of your shares accumulating interest. So like the 15-year stake is always better, but this the added bonus for being longer tapers off at 10 years. So a lot of stakes are going to come offline around year 10 because that's when like that part of the bonus tapers off. And also like the age profile of people in Hex. When I like a couple months ago, I took a poll inside the Hex chat room. I'll have to find it, but the average age of people in there was around like 40. And so 15 years to a 40-year-old is like, that's like 65. That's pretty old, So
55.
Yeah, even like, or 55. Yeah. So like, you may want to like, earn your Hex sooner than that. You might not want to wait till you're like at that like true retirement age. Maybe you want to retire at age 48. So maybe you're going to go for 8-year stakes. And so, that's just like the trade-off based on your own situation. Like that's just how you have to assess it. Whereas me, where, I'm 27, the 15-year stake, like I'm going to be humming when I'm in my 40s. Like I'll probably be like way smarter than I am now, way wealthier than I am now. Just to, have a better understanding of the world, know way more people, just have like more people out there that, I'm friends with. Like, to me, I'm okay with these longer term stakes because like, to me, I feel like my life's just going to start like kicking off when I'm in that age period. And so like so like if my stake, so 2035, how old will I be? 35 plus 8. So I'll be like 42 at the end of my first, like at the end of my first wave of stakes. I'll be about 40, 40, what did I say? 45? 42. But then like from there, if all of these, so like all the Hex that I earned from the big payday, from these shares, if now every one of those Hex is now amplified through a 15-year stake starting then from age 42 to 57, I'll be getting max length stakes expiring. So I'll be like one of the main accumulators of the Hex interest. So like, like when we look at the, where is it? On hex.live, there's these fun things called the leagues. And this just shows like how many people, it's based on how many shares you have. So let's see, learn more about leagues. Hex leagues are rankings of all accounts based on the relative percentage of Hex shares. The more and longer an account stakes for, the more shares they're likely to get compared to other accounts. The relative percentage of shares changes dynamically based on staking positions of all accounts. Stake wisely. So Prosperous Poseidon is 10% of total shares. Winning Whale, 1%. Super Shark, 0.1. Dabbing Dolphin, 0.01. Swift Squid, less, and then it goes on from there. Down to the silent shells. These are non-stakers. You know, like maybe I'll be in one of these winning whales, you know, like because I'm in like the kind of the younger crop of hexagons. And I'm one of like the early stakers. So like my early stakes are going to pay off really well, you know, over this period of time. And then my plan is to turn those into another crop of 15-year stakes. So like if we were to like look at all the people that were like staking Hex like from the very start, I'm probably in like the bottom, you know, 5% of age. And if, you know, people are like starting to taper off at those like later ages, and like they're going to be getting to the point where they're going to be ready to like be passing on their assets to their, you know, to their families. You know, maybe a lot of them are going to keep staking. You know, that's like, you know, that's what I'm working against, is like all the current hexagons that are older than me, maybe have kids to pass stuff on to right now. And then like in 15 years from now, their kids are now going to be like almost 18. And then they're going to be like, you know, okay, I'm going to like, you know, pass this on to you. So like, you know, they may be entering long-term stakes, or maybe they're going to be selling because they want to live like a good lifestyle for them and their family. You know, like they have to make that like decision based on their own circumstance. So what I'm hoping for is that a lot of these like OG hexagons, you know, that are in these longer term stakes, I'm hoping that they sell more than they restake. One, so I can potentially buy lower and sell higher, because Hex is still a good swing trade coin. Like it has enough volatility to where like it's good for trading. So I want good dips to catch. But I also want them not to be staking so that I can get the majority of the stake shares. So that like on my like second Call of Duty with Hex, you know, I'll make it through my first 15-year phase. But then that next 15-year phase, like I want to be like a mega whale where I'm earning like a majority of the inflation. Like, you know, I'm the oligarch, you know, that's like, and I'm earning it on a, you know, every 2 months, I'm earning like a massive stack of Hex from a 3-year time lock that earned me a certain amount of interest, certain amount of big payday bonus. Now, you know, parlayed into a 15-year time lock. Like that's gonna be a massive payout. So like that's kind of the time horizon I'm looking at this. Like Hex is a like 5,555 day coin, but I'm actually looking at it as like a 11,110 day period. Like I'm looking at this like 30-day time horizons, because like that's what it's like loading up for. It's like this like, you know, big payday inflation. You know, that's just like kind of like the second era of it. It's like right now we're in like accumulation phase. Second phase, we're going to be like, you know, amplifying that through our initial stakes. And then this next one, that's when we're going to be like getting 15-year stakes ending every 2 years. And, you know, then, you know, we'll see what type of impact we want to have on the world, because like we'll have the wealth, we'll have the influence, and it's going to be coming on a regular basis. So that's what my general like staking strategy, knowing everything that I know now about these different phases of Hex. That's what I have to look forward to. And that's why I, you know, definitely recommend to people that like, you know, if you're gonna, if you need to buy something and then sell it in a couple of years, maybe just buy some Bitcoin or some ETH, you know, because those can probably go up. You know, you can, there's good lending markets around them. So you don't even need to sell them. You can like borrow against them. There isn't that yet in Hex, which I think that's going to be something that I want to cook up at one of these times, like a lending platform, kind of like Nexo, but for Hex. But like, you know, like if you have shorter term time horizons, like, you know, Bitcoin and ETH are probably good for you, and maybe other coins too. But if like you have like really long term time horizons, Hex I think is the superior long term hold coin, because it has a staking mechanism where for long-term stakers, it's heavily deflationary. Like that's what people love about Bitcoin, is that it's like after the max supply is reached, it's deflationary, because every time some is sent, like a little bit gets lost forever. Like the little decimal point, it's like, it's too small to send, so it's just gone. So Bitcoin is deflationary over time. Whereas Hex is always inflationary, but from the perspective of long-term stakers, it's deflationary. And from the perspective of short-term stakers or no stakers, it's inflationary. So like it has that dynamic where like if you have long-term time horizons, you can really make that work for you. And so that's what's so exciting about these long-term stakes that we have lined up, is that like, it doesn't end there. Like by no means are we done with Hex at the end of, this period. Like that's what we're going for, is like, what does this next period look like?
Brian, you have been brilliant tonight. Like brilliant.
Thank you.
This is really extraordinary. I'm actually really glad my daughter got to hear, some of this and really understand. And this is amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm glad this has been like bubbling up inside of me. Like I've been trying to wrap my mind around like what this big payday is going to look like, what the inflation is going to look like. And I think we got a pretty good representation of like what could happen here, where, we got the high inflation, we got the medium inflation, we got the low inflation. And then